Hi folks, Robert Lowell Goller here. Now we've been hearing recently here in the village of East Aurora some troubles with e-bikes, and even this morning I saw dirt bikes were mentioned of young people riding their dirt bikes hazardously around the village of East Aurora, along with e-bikes and just normal bicycles, disrespecting the rules, ignoring the rules of the road. And it's interesting because summertime seems to be to bring out the mischief among young people. Adults do it too, but young people particularly at summertime. And I've heard people recently talk about how kids these days and how some of this mischief is brand new, that it's never happened before. But we only have to go back a couple years. Every generation has their own summer mischief, and mind you, it's not all the kids. It's actually a very small percentage that do this, that get into the news. But it's not a new problem. And actually, I was going through the old newspapers 100 years ago, 1925, and it was interesting to see the similarity between the summer mischief of 1925 and 2025. And two items stood out in 1925 that drew attention of the village board and the newspaper. And one of them was bicycles. It's interesting, bicycles have always been a problem since they became popular in the late 1800s. They actually had to make rules about no bicycles on sidewalks because so many young people particularly were whipping in and out of pedestrians. Pedestrians were getting hit back in the 1890s, and they were just riding in the middle of the roads, paying no attention to traffic. But in 1925, one of the things that bothered local people, and they called it objectionable and unnecessary noises, was what the village board called it in the local newspaper in August of 1925. It turns out young people were putting sirens, whistles, and what they called cutouts. So they'd take like pieces of wood or cardboard and put it in their bike to make interesting noises into the spokes, to make loud noises as they passed along. And so they would make these little whistles and sirens to put on their bicycles, and the faster they went, the louder the siren or the whistle was. So these kids would ride up and down the streets with their bicycles really, really fast in order to get a louder sound. Now the kids thought this was really, really cool. The adults, particularly the members of the village board, did not find this cool at all. And they actually came out with a statement and said, the only vehicle entitled to a siren is a fire engine or ambulance. If you have one on your bicycle and ride down the street with it screeching, it is not only annoying to everyone, but in some cases disrupts traffic and is an actual nuisance. Now, the village code had a prohibition against artificial noises on bicycles and automobiles. In fact, people were doing this on their cars. They were putting whistles on their cars, and that was also a problem here in the village because they thought it was cool and drew attention to themselves, and the village board did not think that was cool at all. And so they actually had an ordinance on the books, but they were talking similar to how the village board is talking today about e-bikes and strengthening the ordinance. They were doing the same thing about these whistles and sirens and cutouts, these noisemakers on bicycles. They were meeting similar to how they are today on e-bikes to discuss this problem that was pervasive here in the village of East Aurora. Another thing, and the reason I'm standing here on Main Street in front of a street lamp was in the summer of 1925, there was a problem. The mayor at the time was Albert Hubbard II. He had said that the problem was, he drew attention to the problem in the newspaper of young boys climbing street poles, the utility poles, and those street poles did not look like this. They were actually along Main Street here. They would have been more like the telephone poles out on the secondary streets, the wooden telephone poles. But the boys were climbing, at least a couple boys anyway, were climbing these poles. And back then the lights didn't look fancy like this. They actually didn't have the reflectors on it or the they didn't look nostalgic like this. They were literally just arms that came off the side of the utility pole, and there was a screw-in bulb that had a shade over the top of it. And because they were so dim back in 1925, they were actually really close to the road, closer, maybe about the same height as these, but certainly closer to the road than the ones that are on the secondary streets, the street lights that you see around the village. But the boys were climbing up these telephone poles. They were going to climbing out on that little arm that was attached with the street light. And because it wasn't the old-fashioned light bulbs, not the ones that we have today, they could unscrew them, and they would unscrew them just enough so that they wouldn't turn on. And of course, during the daytime, you couldn't tell that they wouldn't turn on at night, or the village Department of Public Works, the crews would think that that the light bulb had blown out, when in fact it had just been unscrewed just enough to have it turn off. The boys found this fun. They found it cool. They thought it was a cool little prank to do. The village officials were not thrilled at all because of the time and effort it took for them to fix the problem and go up and screw the bulbs back in, determine whether they were blown out or just the result of the pranks of these boys around town. And so Elbert Hubbard II, who was, in addition to being the mayor of East Aurora, also was the leader of the Roycroft at the time, he issued a statement in the East Aurora Advertiser on August 27th, a week after the whole warning about sirens and whistles on bicycles, and he said, "Boys are warned to keep off the electric poles. A group of boys, especially from down on Buffalo Road," he pointed out a specific neighborhood, "climbing poles and unscrewing the bulbs just enough so they'd go off. It would be so easy for a boy to be electrocuted. What a terrible thing that would be. All in fun, the boys will be boys," but he was pointing out that that could lead to dire consequences, similar to other things. Pranks that seem like they're just all in fun do have sometimes serious consequences. And he actually called on the parents to step up. Where are the parents kind of situation. You hear that today. It's not a new thing. Back in 1925, the village leaders were calling on parents to step up and to make sure that the kids were staying off the utility poles. So not a new problem, not a new occurrence. These summer mischief, summer pranks go back years and years and years, and even 100 years ago. Those are just two examples of how kids got themselves into trouble here in our little village. Again, I'm Robert Lowell Goller. Thank you for joining me for our weekly chats about local history. Again, I am the town and village historian, but these videos and a lot of my research are not officially connected to my duties as town and village historian. If you have a comment, question, please send it along to me. Until next time, thank you for keeping history alive. See you next time on Main Street.